You're all very welcome back to the Celtic Soul Podcast with me, Andrew Milne. My guest on the show today will be Celtic historian and author David Potter. This episode has been sponsored by the Tunnel Craftworks Portadown, and I would like to thank Tip McCann for his continued support of both the fanzine and now the podcast. If your business or Celtic Supporters Club would like to give us some support or sponsor an episode, please email us at info@celticfanzine.com. You can also contact us through the website or on our social media platforms. 10 years of group stage football in Europe was what we were reminded of when the reporter told Neil Lennon last night after we watched Sarajevo park the bus at home in a one-off tie. Celtic did come up with the goods and produced another winning performance, this time French Eddie producing the goods in front of goal. Celtic were dominant throughout the game, and now we all look towards St Johnstone away on Sunday and a crucial 3 points up for grabs. Let's not look too far ahead to the Rangers game. This game is every bit as important in the quest for 10, and the same amount of points are up for grabs. The only thing that's up for grabs when we play Rangers, apart from 3 points, is bragging rights, and bragging rights don't win titles. 10 years of waiting for the draw, hoping to get online quick enough to get a cheap flight or a hotel in the Europa League or the Champions League. How we would have loved to be doing that today when the draw was made earlier. UEFA have given the go-ahead for 30% of fans to re-enter football stadiums if the government of that country allows. We have seen fans return to football in Germany, but in my home country, Ireland, and indeed in Scotland, restrictions are getting tighter as the coronavirus continues to spread. So I can't see us getting into Celtic Park anytime soon, but I really hope I'm wrong. David Potter is a retired school teacher who hails from Forfar in Scotland. He is a respected Celtic historian and has wrote numerous books on the club. He has contributed more than 90 minutes for many years and is also a regular contributor on our website, celticfanzine.com. Hi David, you're very welcome to the Celtic Soul Podcast. Did you ever think that we would be living under such restrictions, and how have you spent the time in lockdown, cocooning and not being able to go to see Celtic?
Well, it's been a problem. Obviously, nobody could have predicted what's happened to the world the last 6 months or so. Nevertheless, I think it's something we just have to get through. I think we will get through it. I think that one of the great comforts is actually the knowledge of Celtic, the sort of thing that's kept us going for all these years. I mean, for example, at the start of lockdown, I wrote a book. A publisher wanted me to do this, to write a book on Celtic in the Scottish Cup. It's the Scottish Cup, Celtic's favourite trophy, which will be published in November. And that's been a great help to me. I've obviously done in a hurry, but my publisher was quite keen that it should be done in lockdown because he thinks there's all the more need for people. People do actually read books a lot more in lockdown. Books have not been affected by the general economic collapse. They're one of the things they're doing very well.
Yeah, it's funny when you mention the books. I think when we went into lockdown first, our readership on the website went through the roof. And then out of that, we started the podcast just to keep busy, really. And that's gone now. That's gone. We can't believe it. Well, that's gone. So, yeah, there definitely is. And until the season started up again, people were delving into the history because we couldn't look forward at that stage. We were delving into history. So I'm sure a lot of your books got read. Now, just before we get stuck into talking about Celtic, how many books have you written in total, and how many of them are about Celtic?
I think it's difficult to say because I've done a lot in conjunction with other people. Probably I've done about, 40 books, and about 30 of them will be about Celtic.
Wow.
My speciality is actually biographies of old Celtic players. For example, at the moment, I'm now working on one about Alec McNair, from Stennismuir, the right back of the great team of Mealy's Edwardian 11. And I've just started working on him, and he's a fascinating character as well.
And how do you research? Obviously, you've done some books with players who are still living, so it's easy to research them, or the families are still living. How hard is it to research a book about one of these players from yesteryear?
Well, actually, to be honest, I frankly prefer doing books about yesteryear because if you do things about current players or recently dead players, you have a great chance of saying the wrong thing or upsetting people, which is not really what I'm in the interest I really want to do. I'd far rather write about somebody like Alec McNair or McMenemy or Sonny Jim or somebody like that, somebody who's long dead, because you're less likely to upset anybody. And also there's a certain degree of objectivity about it because you're based on looking for newspapers and whatnot. Whereas if you go by people's recollections of an event, they're very much skewed in one direction or another. And quite a lot of players I've discovered actually get things wrong about their own life. They claim they played in the game when in fact they didn't.
So you need the facts to be correct. And I suppose are you delving through libraries and books and newspapers?
Yes, basically the British Newspaper Archive has been a great tool for me because that has most newspapers of the era in which I'm interested. And they're very good, and you have to work hard to find it. I mean, it's a lot of hard work finding these things, but especially in lockdown, it means I don't actually have to go to libraries. Obviously, it's a lot better if you could go to libraries and spend a whole afternoon there, which is clearly not possible these days. But it's a lot easier just by looking up on your computer. And it's remarkable what you find on your computer. Remarkable.
Sure is. I read the Sonny Jim book again recently. It wasn't actually, it was before the lockdown. And it's testimony to you that you are educating us and bringing these people to life in these books, because a lot of people, they go back as far as maybe 57 and the 7-1, and because people are still alive and they can still talk about it, and then they push forward to the Great Lisbon Lions and so forth. So for me, it's great to delve in, and I think the readers of the fanzine are lucky as well, because you've always contributed and given us. There's always something we don't know when you send an article in, and we always get a great response from the readers.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
But I'm going to push forward now, many years. I'm going to push forward to last night. Another qualification for a European group, not the Champions League. I noticed last night that Neil was more relieved that we qualified. Yeah. I then switched over to watch Dundalk, and they were celebrating like they had won the Europa League, because it's a massive thing for an Irish club to qualify for the group stages. And then I finally finished off my football viewing watching the end of the Rangers game, and they celebrated like they had won it. So it seems to be a bigger thing across the city than it does be to Celtic and maybe the Celtic fans. Do you think we've been spoiled for the past 10 years?
I think we probably have. We've also been deprived in a way as well, because we feel that we really should be in the Champions League and doing well in the Champions League, because our support is big enough to warrant that. The support and enthusiasm for the club worldwide is, in my view, actually second to none. And we really feel, therefore, that we should be in the Champions League and performing well in the Champions League. Having said that, getting to the Europa League is at least something. My main emotion last night was relief. I was very glad to hear the referee's final whistle. I mean, I know we played very well, actually, to be in some ways, and we should have scored more goals, but there's still that feeling that Celtic tend to give away silly goals at the back. Now, that has actually stopped to a certain extent the past recently. But in the time of when Roy Aitken and Tom McAdam and that played in the defence, you could always guarantee that Celtic would throw away a silly goal in Europe. And you're always that at the back of your mind. And Europe has always been a great disappointment to me in recent years. I mean, that, of course, is because I remember Lisbon.
Yeah, I think of our older listeners that are kind of spoiled. And I think a lot of our younger listeners are spoiled, and the younger fans, because they don't know defeat. You were lucky enough to remember the highs when Celtic were conquering Europe. But someone like me who's in between, I thought it was great when I started following Celtic. Just when I got an interest in them, they done a centenary double. They won the cup the following year. And then I had 10 barren years, with the exception of the Scottish Cup. So I think maybe some are spoiled, some were spoiled, and some of us really are enjoying this because we went through those barren years, as I said. Now, also, we have a game on Saturday against St Johnstone, or Sunday against St Johnstone. And I think listening to fans last night and listening to a couple of podcasts this morning, I think we're overlooking this game. These are games we can slip up, and we have slipped up after European games before. I think people are looking too far ahead. There's an international break before we play Rangers. So it's very important. And you know more than anybody that upsets happen, because you know the history books.
Well, certainly. I think that St Johnstone is a ground which you always get a tough game there, but we tend to pull through at St Johnstone in recent years. Certainly, it wasn't always like this. I've seen them being beaten at St Johnstone in the past several times. But I think that it's a ground that actually I like going to, both at their old Muirton Park and now their McDermott Park, because they're a team which is not really from a footballing part of Scotland. But yeah, they do very well to keep their team going, And I've always liked St Johnstone supporters. I know they're one of the few supporters of football teams that actually vote Conservative in Scotland. Apparently, them and Rangers and Queen of the South apparently are all tend to vote Conservatives, but they're all quite decent people. They're kind of like Dunfermline. Dunfermline's a team that I've always liked their supporters. There's nothing really nasty about Dunfermline, or indeed. Most supporters of most teams are actually quite decent. There are the exceptions, of course. But to get back to your point about St Johnstone, yes, we mustn't take them too lightly, because the way this league is going this year, it is going to be very, very tight. Because we can't really afford any slip-ups at all, because Rangers, let's face it, are really quite good this year. They're far better than they've been for many years, in my view.
Yeah, they're not conceding many goals either.
No, they're not.
For the listeners, that's Ali in the background, David's dog.
That's my dog, yes. Yeah.
So welcome to the podcast, Ali.
He's actually in the back door, believe it or not, but it's a nice day. He's running about daft to the back door. Yeah.
Oh, he can't be the man's best friend. David, can you take the listeners back to your early days of supporting Celtics? And I know your dad was an influence on you. Can you just take us back maybe through the early days?
Well, I first saw Celtic at Dens Park in 1958. I was just too young to have gone to see the 7-1 game. I remember all about the 7-1 game. I remember who was doing that afternoon. It was at the matinee performance of the pictures, and I remember coming home and all that. I was just a bit too young for the 7-1 game. And the context of Lisbon and the success of the late 60s was actually late in the early 60s. The early 60s were my formative years, and really it was a dreadful time to be supporting Celtic, because they had good enough players. They had, in theory, a good manager, but the manager wasn't allowed to run the team. The team was run by the Bob Kelly, who, frankly, for all that he did for Celtic in the political sense, he really didn't know very much about football. He wasn't actually a football man. I take my hat off to him for his fight to keep the Era flag flying over Celtic Park in 1952, and he made sure that Celtic weren't ever bullied. I mean, he was well into the SFA and the Scottish League and things like that, so he did a good job in that respect, but frankly, he just didn't know very much about football. And Mr. McGrory was a nice gentleman, but rather easily persuaded that this guy should be inside right and this guy should be inside left. And the result was really a very frustrating and a very angry and a very heartbreaking time to be a young man to follow Celtic. I mean, I remember vividly the Scottish Cup final replays on Wednesday nights of Dunfermline 61 Rangers in 63. I mean, these were just awful nights, awful to go through. And never any sort of thing you could say against Rangers supporters to shut them up other than the 7-1, which the oftener you talked about 7-1, the less effect it had on them, because it was, got more and more into the history, and we just really had nothing to speak about until Mr. Steen arrived. Mr. Steen's arrival was more or less instant change. My favourite game probably is still the Celtic Dunfermline Scottish Cup final of 1965, Billy McNeil's header, and probably it beats Lisbon. I was actually at Hampden that day. I wasn't at Lisbon. I was a student. I couldn't afford it. But I certainly was at Hampden in 1965, and it's probably still is my favourite Celtic game in it. It changed everything. I mean, the word revolution comes to mind. I mean, you have to be very careful with the word revolution if you talk about the French and the Russian revolutions and so on. But certainly this game against Dunfermline, 24th of April 1965, was indeed a revolution.
So would you compare the 65 Cup final maybe to, in modern day, to the 6-2 against Rangers when Martin O'Neill, we knew that things were changing?
Yes, the cry was no defenders game. Yes, I love that game as well. I would actually compare it more the parallel in, if I may say so, in your time, was probably the Airdrie Cup final of 1995. Now, that was a terrible game. It was really one of the worst Celtic teams of all time, actually. It was, I mean, they really didn't deserve to win very much in these days, because the players they had were just, frankly, substandard in some cases. But they won well that day. Didn't win well that day. They won that day. And the feeling I remember of the support, I wasn't at that game, couldn't get a ticket. Because remember, there's only 37,000 allowed in Hampden in 1995. And the feeling of the support, they were just energised and so on. And actually, the next 2 years, Celtic played well. In 1996, 1997, they were a good team in both these years. Just that Rangers had the luck on the right occasions, and Rangers got the better of them. But I would certainly say the parallel, looking back on it historically, yes, the 6-2 game, that was the one that really changed things. And appropriately, it was at the start of the new century as well, 27th of August, 2000, if I remember rightly, was it? Am I right? And that really changed things. And that showed everybody that Celtic now, with a new stadium and energised support, that they really did mean business. And of course, they did.
And push on, they did. And we've enjoyed it ever since. I know we've had a couple of managers and we've had many players, but the fans are always there, and I think we have, we've had some great times. Who would have believed that we would have got to a final in Europe when we were knocked out by Bâle in the Champions League qualifier, and then we went on this amazing run to Seville, which probably a season we won nothing, but a season that sticks out in my mind as one of my favourite seasons following Celtic.
Yes, 2003. Actually, I frankly think that the best football was played, though, in season 2002. If you remember, we won the league by a country mile that day, beating, I think, Livingston to win it, with games in hand. But the football was really superb that year. Again, unfortunately, we lost in 2 unfortunate games to Rangers and also in Europe as well. But I really enjoyed that particular year, 2001 to 2002. I know we didn't win as much as